Hello everyone, and welcome to part 9 of What If the Constructicons Were in Transformers Prime. So without further ado, let's get right to it. So we start off where we left off in part 8, where the Decepticons arrive on Cybertron. Soundwave immediately opens up a space bridge, bringing through Dreadwing, Knockout, and the rest of the Decepticon armada from Earth. Megatron immediately commands all of his Decepticons to scatter throughout Cybertron and find the final Omega key. He and Soundwave will attempt to locate the Omega lock, and he orders Knockout to stay behind. Meanwhile, Wheeljack's ship arrives on Cybertron, and the build team looks out the window like, whoa, this is Cybertron? It's much different than we thought it to be. RC then says, it wasn't always like this. Before the war, it used to be a bright and happy place. Hopefully, one day we can restore it to that former glory. The Autobots then land in Iacon City. Immediately, Optimus decides to split the forces. He will lead Bumblebee, Ratchet, and RC, and Wheeljack will lead the build team. And they will split off and look for the Omega key. Meanwhile, the Constructicons are scavenging through Kaon City. They walk into an abandoned building, and they find a computer that's online. And they're like, but how? Isn't this planet supposed to be dead? No life? And Scrapper's like, it doesn't matter. Let's search for any details we could get on the final Omega key, if it's still on Cybertron. They then hear footsteps. The Constructicons get their weapons ready, aim at the direction of where the footsteps are, but they are set aback. Cause it's none other than Shockwave. Shockwave is shocked, no pun intended, to see the Constructicons here. So are the Constructicons. Cause they thought Shockwave was dead. But Shockwave does tell them the same story, that a pair of Autobots had infiltrated his lab. That's where Scrapper says, well, it's good to see that you're alive. Now, have you seen this? Then he shows a hologram of the Omega key. And Shockwave is like, that does not ring a bell. My apologies. But what is the purpose of these Omega keys? The regeneration of our home planet. Right after that is when we see Megatron, Soundwave, and Dreadwing and a ton of Viacons walk into the room. Shockwave instantly bows before his master's presence, Lord Megatron. And Megatron says, Shockwave, it is good to see you, my old friend. Then Megatron groans, that fool Starscream told me you were dead. Shockwave then replies, may I ask what happened to Starscream? Megatron then says, he has failed me too many times. So I gave him his long-awaited execution. He then looks to Scrapper. Did you bring him up to speed? And Scrapper nods. Yes. And then Megatron turns to Shockwave and says, I would very much appreciate your help in the search for this Omega key and the Omega lock. Shockwave then responds with, yes, Lord Megatron. Meanwhile, Optimus and his team are in the Sea of Rust, searching for the Omega lock, because Optimus still got the message from the Star Saber of the Omega lock's location, so he's leading this team there. Soon enough, they do find the Omega lock. They then immediately inform Wheeljack and the other team of their find. But as they inform the other team of their find, this team encounters something. The Constructicon ship. But it's heavily guarded by Insecticons and Knockout. Wheeljack then says, they must be keeping the Omega keys in here. Let's get them. The build team then combine, and then they all rush in. The Insecticons transform and start attacking Landfill. And that's where Wheeljack sneaks in and confronts Knockout. Knockout cowers a little bit. Wheeljack is like, where are the Omega keys, Con? Because they happen not to be there. Because Soundwave and Dreadwing and Megatron obviously took them with them to Shockwave's lab. But Wheeljack doesn't know this yet. Wheeljack then aims his gun blaster point ready at Knockout's face like, tell me where the keys are, And Knockout's like, they took them to Shockwave. Wheeljack's like, Shockwave, but he's dead. Knockout's like, no, he's been alive all this time. Megatron found him. Wheeljack's like, grrr. And that's where something comes in over the radio. The location for the final Omega Key. Wheeljack reads it, then types buttons, downloading it to his ship. He then knocks out Knockout. No pun intended again here. Wheeljack then moves out, where Landfill has, I'd say, successfully taken out half of the Insecticon hive. But that's where Wheeljack says, retreat, retreat. And then the build team discombines. They gather with Wheeljack. Wheeljack then throws a grenade. But this grenade was helped and upgraded by the build team, where it had the entire capacity to literally wipe out the Insecticon hive. So that one grenade wiped the whole other half of the Insecticon hive that didn't die out. So yeah, the Insecticons are dead now. Wheeljack then radios Optimus and informs him that the Decepticons have located the final Omega Key with Shockwave's help. Yeah, a lot of explaining. Yeah, Shockwave's alive. They're all surprised. The build team are like, who's Shockwave? Then Wheeljack's like, a mad scientist of the Decepticons. We'll explain more later. That's where Optimus commands Wheeljack and the build team to head to the Omega Lock immediately. So, the build team will remain with RC, Ratchet, and Bumblebee, while he and Wheeljack go into space and find the final Omega Key. Optimus says to guard the Omega Lock at all costs. Meanwhile, back at the Constructicon ship, Megatron and Dreadwing are there. And Megatron is super angry and furious with Knockout for allowing the Insecticon hive to be destroyed. Knockout cowers in fear. Please, Lord Megatron, I'm sorry. And then Megatron is like, gah, no matter. Let's go and find the last Omega Key. So yes, Megatron, Dreadwing, and Knockout are leaving in the Constructicon ship to find the final Omega Key in space. And Optimus and Wheeljack are also going into space to search for the final Omega Key. So we cut to an asteroid belt where there's a pod landed. And there we see Smokescreen just sitting there. That is until he sees a ship. And out immediately comes Dreadwing flying out, tackles Smokescreen, and pins him to the ground. Megatron and Knockout then walk out of the ship. Megatron then immediately looks at Smokescreen's Autobot symbol and says, so, Autobot, tell me, where is the Omega Key? Smokescreen obviously instantly recognizes Megatron, and it says, ugh, I'm never gonna tell you anything. I don't even know what you're talking about. Then that's when Wheeljack's ship arrives. Wheeljack and Optimus immediately run out with their weapons drawn at the Decepticons. Optimus glances at Smokescreen, and Wheeljack is like, an Autobot? Optimus is like, indeed. Megatron then says, so, your Autobot here has the final Omega Key. That's when Knockout scans him. Haha, bingo. Dreadwing and Megatron immediately engage Optimus and Wheeljack in a fight, with Megatron's final words before he goes and fights Prime being, get the key no matter what. Meanwhile, Dreadwing starts engaging Wheeljack, Optimus starts engaging Megatron. Immediately, Knockout then looks at Smokescreen and says, well, Autobots. And then shows the phase shifter, finders keepers. And then he activates the phase shifter, reaching in the Smokescreen's chest just like in canon, and whipping out the Omega Key. And gotcha. Optimus then immediately, seeing the Decepticons get their hand on the final Omega Key, literally uses the Star Saber to slice Megatron's hand off, with him also wielding the Dark Star Saber, just like in canon. But this time, he pins Megatron. He then whips up the Star Saber. Megatron puts his hand up. Knockout and Dreadwing look in shock. That's when Optimus literally impales the Star Saber in the Megatron spark, just like how Bumblebee did in canon in Deadlock. With Prime's final words to Megatron being, "I will not allow you to poison the minds of the new generation of Cybertronians." And with that, Megatron goes offline. He's gone. Megatron has been killed by Optimus Prime. That's when Dreadwing orders Knockout to retreat with the Omega Key. But that's when Smokescreen grabs Knockout with the Omega Key, snatches it out of his arm, and then with his other arm, grabs the face shifter from Knockout. Knockout in surprisement looks at Smokescreen, but Smokescreen kicks him. Optimus is like, "Move, Autobots, move." They then head back into the ship, with Smokescreen accompanying them with the Omega Key and the face shifter in hand. Dreadwing allows them to escape, but then he goes to his fallen master's body, and he's like, "I shall avenge your death, my lord." Optimus and Wheeljack are in the ship, and Optimus turns to Smokescreen. "Thank you, fellow Autobot. I never got your name." And then he's like, "Smokescreen, sir." "Thank you very much, Smokescreen." And then he tells Wheeljack, "Wheeljack, set a course for Cybertron." The Autobots then make it to Cybertron with an Omega Key in their possession. So the Autobots have to, and the Decepticons have to. But now, I'd say in a final push, Optimus does assemble his Autobots. And they do storm Shockwave's lab, killing a good majority of the Decepticons and driving the rest into retreat. I'd say the only main other Decepticon casualty would be Soundwave. Yes, Soundwave. And I'd say the one to get this kill would be Wheeljack. So the ones to retreat are Shockwave and the Constructicons, and maybe a few straggler Viacons. With the Autobots' victory, they then make their way to the Omega Lock, restoring their home planet, and they all start cyberforming Cybertron. The Constructicons are then following Shockwave. The Constructicons are then tell Shockwave, "What did we do? We completely lost. We have no contact with Lord Megatron at all." And Shockwave is like, "Do not fear. I have a backup plan." And he takes them into a lab where we then see the Predacon in a tube. And then from there, we cut to Earth. Buried under rubble, we see Starscream's body. And then we hear a voice, "Starscream." And it's none other than Unicron approaching Starscream. And that's where I'm going to leave it off here, everybody. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and see y'all in the finale.